Bonnie, you wrote a book, and the name of the book is God Loves Messy People.
Yes.
I love the title. I love it.
Thank you.
Tell me about that book.
Thank God that he does love messy people. It was my second book, and basically I wanted to share my story and share other people's stories that you would think it was too late for them. And I don't believe too late is in God's vocabulary. And the whole reason that we need Christ and that I love him so desperately is because he loved me in my messiest, and continues to, in my messiest days. And I love the messy people in the Word. You know, we tend to put them in a stained glass kind of image sometime in our minds. And I think if you go back and you really study their stories, a lot of very messy stories, very messy people. I think God intentionally used messy people to bring his word to us so that we would know that he loves us no matter what. And I went through some messy stuff in my life. I went through an unwanted divorce. I always thought people that were divorced were just big losers. I didn't want the divorce, but it was out of my control. My children were very young at the time. I thought single parents would probably just really mess up their kids. And I was a single mom for quite a while. My daughter was 6 and my son was 2 when I went through the divorce. And then 5 years later, I nosedived into a clinical depression. I knew nothing about depression, really, except what I'd seen in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. I was like, this is not encouraging, Lord. And I began to, I really studied the Word, and it was like depression's all through the Bible, people's lives falling apart, single moms, single fathers, pain and heartache. That's the reason we need him. And this side of heaven, it's going to be that way.
Bonnie, what I love is your willingness to just be real. I mean, that's really part of your story, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I believe that's kind of, I can't not be real.
Yeah.
I'm not good at not being real. And for me, the stock answers and the stock phrases fall apart when you're in a place where you're really devastated or your life turns upside down. I know I grew up and accepted Christ at a young age, grew up in a Christian home, and I thought, if you do A, and then you do B, your life will look like C. And I found that isn't true for anyone.
No.
And A plus B usually equals Q, or some upside down twisted thing that makes no sense. But in the middle of that is where God does this majestic, amazing, and very intimate work with us. And so I love to go out. Now, and for a while I thought I'll never share my story publicly because it's disgraceful and dishonoring. And I was part of a very successful recording act that was on the road for about 15 years called First Call. And while I was out with First Call and we had a lot of success and a lot of visibility, I was going through this private nightmare. And I thought, I'll never speak about this publicly because it would disgrace the people that, I thought no matter what brings you to the door of divorce or depression or what, it feels like a shameful place. And so it's interestingly, God had other plans, as he always does. And in a solo ministry now that I've had for almost 12 years, he has opened a place for me to write songs and CDs about my personal life and go out and share this underbelly. And I found that people are hungry for that. There's people sitting out there all around the world and all around the country that are sitting in churches or sitting there wondering, can God really love me if I'm in this broken place? That's the whole point.
Yes.
If I just open it up a little bit, open a vein, and share what's happened in my life. And unfortunately, too many people in church, this is a very common story.
Yes.
And there are many, many people suffering with depression or divorce recovery, kind of a lot of times go hand in hand. They want to hear somebody say, I've been there, done that.
Yes.
I'm still getting through that, recovering through that. God is with you in the process.
That's right. Bonnie, you talk about as a single mother raising parents on your own and the guilt that you walked through, the concern. Talk about that because, throughout the churches in the nation, single parenting is rampant in this country, everywhere. So that's going to speak to a lot of hearts. How was that for you, and how did you get over the guilt that you carried?
I was raised on guilt. It was like Mom said, here's your potatoes, your meat, and here's some little guilt. And I realized that Christ died to free me from that. But when you are a single parent and you have gone through divorce for whatever reason, and you have these two little sets of eyes looking at you, and watching you. I really think I took 1 step forward and 2 steps back. My daughter has often said, Mom, you pressed into God. No matter what happened, no matter how bad it got, we saw you fall on your face before Him. And a lot of times it was absolutely a falling because I messed up. There were so many times I wanted my life to look differently, and all the dreams that I had wrapped my heart around, I realized they'd become idols. You know, I wanted my life to look this way, and all of a sudden, you know, it was shredded. And my pastor at one point said, you know, you've got to stop dating as a mission field, because I was dating again, and I was getting engaged over and over again because I thought, I'll fix, you know, I need a man in my kid's life, I need a man in my life. And my pastor would say, you've got to stop and just wait on God and listen to God. And he said, what is dead center in your heart? Is it wanting your life to look different, or is it trusting Him and seeking Him first, His kingdom? You know, seek first His kingdom and His will, and everything else will take care of itself. And I went, you know what? Right dead center in my heart is I want my life to look differently. And one of the songs I wrote out of that was called Isaac, the day I lay my Isaac down. It was like, I've got to let go of what I wanted my life to look like and trust Him.
That's an important lesson to learn.
I learned it the hard way.
Yes, because a lot of times women do seek out men to be their answer.
Right.
They can't be the answer.
Yes, and God very gently showed me that over and over again.
Yes.
Baby, you need to turn to me to be your
Yes.
everything. I will parent your children with you. Two parents can't do it. A whole family can't do it.
No.
Single mom, you need me. Trust me to be where you can't be. And I would say that to anybody in that place. My son and my daughter, they love the Lord. God took what people would say was a broken home. It was just the three of us. I prayed over every room in that house. And I just asked God to help give us peace within our home. I can tell you that we really did, and we're very, very close. And I think it's because the Lord really answered those prayers.
Yes.
In spite of me, in spite of bad choices and decisions, getting back up off the floor and saying, okay, I'm going to try. Every day His grace is new. His manna
Yes.
falls every day for what we need that day. There is no way I can look back and say, I did anything to get us through that season of time.
Yes.
There is no possible way. I was in debt over my head. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought my ministry had been discredited forever. I didn't know how my kids were going to turn out. And I look at them now and I go, that is the grace of God. Because people say, oh, you did such a great job with your kids. I go, no, no, no. You don't understand. God did this,
it.
and He will. He will be their father. He will be your husband. I had to get to the place where I let Him do that in me. And I am in a new marriage now, which has its own set of challenges, but that was not the answer to the whole. That was not the answer. And God let me hurt long enough and fall down and get back up enough to finally go, oh yes, I really do need you dead center here. And I need to seek that first.
Yes, and Bonnie, you said, now you used a term that to many people, they don't really understand idolatry.
Yes.
Because we think of idolatry as being bowing down to a false god. We don't think of idolatry as being putting our wannabe husbands above
Yes.
God. We don't think about, even our children
Absolutely.
can be idols. Anything that we put before God
Right.
is an idol, is it not?
Yes, and I think anything plus God that you have to have
Yes.
to be deeply content, is there something plus you that I find myself thinking I can't live without? That I got to check there. Idolatry creeps in different ways. It creeps into our lives. And I think a lot of times we want something to work out a certain way or be a certain way, and all of a sudden we wrap our heart around that so tightly that it becomes an idol. It's a constant ongoing check for me now.
Yes. Now, you struggled in your life. You had to face a very important issue with clinical depression.
Yes.
Tell me about that, because I
Yes.
know depression, it's a dark, dark place to be, isn't it?
Oh, it's hideous.
Yes.
It's hideous. And if I hadn't gone through it personally, I know I wouldn't have the compassion I have for other people. And I was on a national tour and found myself unable to sleep, unable to eat. I lost all this weight. I couldn't stop crying. I didn't know anything about what depression was. And about 2 weeks into this, I went to my pastor's office. I could barely walk around. And he knew exactly what was happening to me. He was very wise, Scotty Smith. He said, I'm going to pray for you, but I want you to go and see a doctor. I want you to get with a counselor. And he said, this is not a shameful thing, but you're in a serious depression. So I started to educate myself. And I found that there are a lot of people in the church dealing with this, but it's the unspoken. We don't want to talk about a mental issue or emotional issue. Now, if you've got cancer, we'll pray for you all day long. But if you're depressed, we'd rather just not hear about it.
Yeah.
But it's all through the Word.
Yes.
Naomi
Yes, it
was
is.
depressed. Leave me alone, Ruth. Go on. I'm over. It's toast for me. You know, she wanted to die. Hannah, I think, was in a clinical depression. By the time Eli came up to her, she had not eaten. She couldn't have a child. She was crying. He thought she was drunk. No, she was at the end of herself. Job was depressed. Christ was depressed in the garden. And in the Amplified Bible, when it describes him, it says deeply distressed and depressed as he agonized in the garden. I just finished a song called The Prayer of Gethsemane, because that's where he really made the choice to take on the cross. And those sweat drops of blood are a medical condition. Extreme stress and depression causes that, and has been recorded in various times of history. I just find it very interesting that it's all through the Bible, but we don't often as Christians, and I felt so ashamed. I was like, where's the joy of the Lord and my strength? And it was like, I don't have any. I don't have any. I found through people praying for me, a small circle of friends held on to me, to getting some help. I have no problem with medication that's monitored by a godly doctor that watches, and getting some counseling and getting to the root of the loss. A lot of it is really loss-based. Some of it was genetic in my family, and I didn't realize my great-great-grandmother's side of the family had a lot of people in her side of the family that had dealt with depression. So nobody talked about it, you know, because at one point I didn't want to live. I seriously sat and thought, I don't want to kill myself because my kids need me. Now, if I didn't have my children in my life, I'd rather just get out of this world.
At that point, what was going on in you? Were you hearing voices? Did you have thoughts that went over and over? I need to do this. What was going on inside?
Yeah, there's some people overeat, don't sleep too much. There's all kinds of symptoms. My book, Laddered Out of Depression, kind of an overview of different kinds of depression. But for me, not eating, not sleeping, that is what they do to prisoners. They torture them because it makes your brain start going whacked. And then the chemicals in your brains don't start functioning well. I really did have a very bad pattern of replaying all my failures, not seeing hope, and then thinking, really, God has got to be sick of me at this point. All I'm doing is crying. I'm walking through the grocery store crying. He's got to have just gone, enough of her. And at one point, I remember I just was so terrified about my mental state, and I couldn't shut it off, that I didn't even know if I believed in God anymore. And I remember taking the Bible and just laying it across my chest and sleeping with it and going, God, I don't know if I even believe you're here. And then I realized, yes, I cannot deny His presence. And really hearing and sensing, I don't have the big, God spoke to me, in an audible voice, but as I went down in the spiral, the more intense I heard Him say, this is why I came. This is why I died.
Yes.
This is why I walked this messy earth, this broken place. This is why I went to the cross and rose again for this time in your life. Don't ever think I'm ever going to let go of you. Hebrews 13:5, He will not forsake us, relax His hold on us, assuredly not. And it was like I kept thinking He would become faint, but His voice began to drown out the other negative voices. And I began to slowly get better. And it took me about a year to get back to zero. I was so depleted. So I think there are jewels in the darkness. And there's a compression of what happens when you're in that place. And God doesn't waste it. I believe He takes everything we go through and He presses it down and goes, okay, now I'm going to give you this jewel back. Because that's how He works.
It doesn't feel like that, though, when you're in that dark place,
Nope.
does it?
It feels horrible.
Yes.
And to say out loud, it feels bad. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to get out. Walking to the mailbox felt like walking up Mount Everest. I would just say to anyone in that place, there is another side. In understanding it and understanding what it is, because part of it is the not knowing what's happening to you, and your brain is all messed up and your body's not functioning and you don't have any energy for anything. and thinking your faith is totally gone and God must be displeased with you and what a shameful person you are.
So you're
No.
hearing and believing all of these
yeah.
lies and all this
Oh, yeah.
torment and
Because that's what
torture.
depression is.
Yes.
Yeah, and all you see is darkness, and you don't see the light. And then you realize, oh my goodness, Christ, the cross, the crucifixion connects me to him in that place. And I've recently been really thinking a lot about this, because the only time we will ever suffer is here. On the other side, we won't pick up a cross.
That's right.
We won't. The only place we ever suffer is this side of heaven. And this side of paradise, how we suffer is to believe him in those dark places. I often say, I knew how to praise him in the light. I learned how to praise him in the dark.
Yes.
With tears streaming down on the floor, crying, but going, I know I know who my Redeemer is. And it was like, I'm thinking, when we have faith, faith is what really, really pleases God. Faith. Because when we see no evidence of anything getting better, when our bank accounts are depleted and there's nobody in our life to help take care of us, or we're looking at our kids and we're going, how am I going to do this? Or somebody leaves us, or there's betrayal. And when we see it's behind the scene,
Yes.
that we still believe he's working,
Yes.
that really kicks the enemy in the behind. I think suffering matters more than we know.
Yes.
And when Christ said, take up my cross and my yoke every day, we'll only do that here.
That's right.
And so a lot of that was depression for me. It was a lot of loss. But I really see that as a great gift, because in that, God can say, look at my girl. She still believes me.
Yes.
She still believes me. Even in the middle of this darkness, that's my girl. Look, she's getting up off the floor again. She's still hoping one day at a time. We only have a chance to do that here.
Yes.
And that matters hugely in the supernatural that we don't see. And people that suffer with depression, it's prevalent in the church. I've heard so many people tell me stories of suicides and people that take their life because they're afraid to tell anyone. Or the Lord does not want that for us. He does not want that for us. And there's nothing under the umbrella of what Christ died for. He took everything to that cross with him, including depression. And for me, many times I thought, well, that was the one thing, that just, or divorce, or that probably, that's that list of sins or places that God goes, No, there's nothing he didn't leave out.
How did you hold on to hope? Because truly, when it's all said and done, it was the seed of hope
It was.
that was planted in you as a Christian,
It
even
was.
through all of those dark days. Had you not had that seed of hope?
You know what I did? I had to get back in the Word like never before.
Yes.
That sounds so trite. But I would say, I could read. I had a stack of books, but I got into the Bible and I said, I want to know who Jesus really was. He said, when you see me, you see the Father.
Yes.
Where did his feet take him? What did he do? Who did he hang out with? How did he respond to people that were broken? And I began to watch the feet of Jesus, and I thought, you've got to be real to me more than ever
Yes.
if I'm going to survive this. And I began to see that everywhere he went, he had no daytimer. He stopped when he saw a hurting woman especially, or somebody that thought, it's too late for me, or somebody that thought, I'm too messed up, look at what I've done. He stopped every time he saw someone like that and said, know me, look at me,
Yes.
and there's going to be hope now. And I began to say, it isn't too late for me. And I began to know him more intimately in a way that I don't think I'd ever known him before. But it was a deliberate choice to say, okay, I'm going to see my doctor. I'm going to stay with my pastor. I'm going to have friends pray for me. A lot of times when you're depressed, you don't even know how to pray.
Yes.
Like, God, just help me.
Yes.
But in getting in his word, I really believe, as politically incorrect as it is, that is the inerrant truth.
That is.
That it will last this world into heaven. That word will never, ever change. And in getting into it and reading the Psalms, how David said, my tears are falling and my bones feel like they're breaking. I was like, yes, that's how I feel. It's all validated in the Word.
It is.
And Christ weeping, passionately weeping over Jerusalem, how I long to take. Christ understands loss, and he understands broken dreams. He understands feelings of, oh, I so wanted this to be different.
Yes.
So it was like getting to know him more in that way has radically changed my walk this side of heaven. And given me a passion for Christ that I didn't have before.
Yes.
The depression. I mean, I loved him, but I love him in a way more deeply because I feel like I've been able to suffer in some way that he understands and met me in that I didn't know before.
Bonnie, he took all of that, what you call messy.
Very messy.
But he did some tremendous things in
Yes, he
and
did.
through your life because
he
of
did.
it. Tell us about that. You've got CDs, you've got books, you've got a production that is going
Yes.
on. Tell us about that.
I'm so excited. I've got several solo CDs and books, and I'm working on another book by myself right now. But for the last almost 3 years, I've been working on a 2-woman musical called Women Who Dare to Believe.
Powerful.
We've got to believe
Yes,
more
yes.
than ever in this time. And one of my lifelong friends is a tremendous actress here in town, and we've written together over the years. One day we sat down and thought, what would it be like if we took all of our gifts and we poured them into this project where we illuminate the lives of women in the Word who, against their culture, who against everything around them, chose to believe God.
Yes.
And women that aren't often just talked about. And so we came up with this. It's a 90-minute musical. Act 1 starts with the slaughter of the innocents when Moses was born. Act 2 with the slaughter of the innocents when Christ was born.
Wow.
We use a 20-foot piece of scarlet material, no sets, no props. We play 21 women of the Word and make them as relevant. We interact with the audience. I wrote the music. This wonderful producer, James Hollahan, who's brilliant, produced it for us. And then while we were studying these women, they were so fascinating. I said, we got to write a Bible study. She said, we can't write a Bible study. I said, why not? Let's write it like we would write one.
Yes.
And so we took everything like, what if there was a multimedia machine back when Jochebed, Moses' mother, had him? And they were killing the babies. What if there was breaking news? What if there was a website? Pro-life midwives union stands strong. The midwives were ordered to kill the babies. They said no. You know, so we took each woman's life and opened it with a blog kind of idea. And then we went into the study that we found about these women, about Tamar, who slept with her father-in-law to make sure she was in the line of the covenant.
Yes.
It's crazy. Nobody wants to talk about that, but this woman is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus.
Yes, she is.
I mean, Rachel and Leah married to the same man. Out of that, 12 tribes of Israel are born. But what was it like for them, tent by tent, those years? And exploring, I guess, messy, interesting, but courageous. You know, Deborah.
Yes.
I mean, just interesting women. And then on the other side, in the New Testament, Anna, who lived her entire life waiting to see that baby, and lived in the temple to be almost 105 years old when she saw the baby Christ. I mean, it's really fascinating. The certain women that we don't know their names that he came in contact with, women with the issue of blood and the adulteress. We never know their names, but how the blood of Christ has impacted and given us real takeaway.
Yes.
For us to look back at their lives and go, they lived in a culture that said push back, and they said no, push forward.
I love this idea. I'm so excited. I want the Bible studies.
Okay. I know how to get them to you.
I do. You know what amazes me? One, it's a very unique idea. And two, I believe that every woman can find someone
Yes.
in those stories that they
Absolutely.
can connect and relate to.
Yes, and we go, they're real people like us.
Yes.
And we've got to dare to believe him in these
Dare to
times more than
believe.
ever. Dare to step out and believe him no matter what. He blesses that.
Yes.
It just turns God's crank when
Yes.
we believe him.
Yes.
I think this throws down the gauntlet in a wonderful way to say, this is your hour. Will you dare to believe him? Will I dare to believe him every day when I get up? Yes, we must. Will we? We can. Our 4 sisters did. That great cloud of witnesses that is cheering us on in Hebrews, they're going, go, believe him, believe him, believe him.
That's
So
beautiful.
It's been a real adventure, a roller coaster ride to see the musical finally come together, the studies done, and to see what God does with it. And to see men who come up to us crying after they've seen it. You know, we didn't know how men would respond. It's real exciting. It's very exciting.
Bonnie, thank you for sharing your
Thank you,
story.
Robin. It's been an honor to be with you. All God's favor to you, my friend.